When you write a computer game, there are two golden rules that you have to start with. Firstly, there's a cup of coffee. And secondly, before you put anything in the universe has to exist. And that might sound strange, so let me explain. If I have a player, in this case a tank, that the player can control, the tank has to drive over the terrain. When it shoots, bullets have to be stopped by hills and things in the way. I can't do half the special effects without the terrain. I can't make the player controllable. You have to start with the game world, the environment that the game is set in. So what I've done is I've dug out an old project, the Wyvern Rage project, which was a fractal terrain system. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using that to generate my landscape objects. That will then be sent into a 3D editing tool to add various scenic elements like buildings and so on. Now, before you laugh at the graphics of what you're looking at here, this is the original Wyvern Rage engine, but it's what it's actually doing at the moment is it's generating the landscape texture whilst it's being played, so it's doing real-time texture generation. I did get the technique going much faster than this, but I've decided not to use it in the World War II game. All the textures will be pre-generated, which makes for a larger download when you actually get the game initially. However, I think this particular method slows the game up too much during play, hurts the frame rates, and so I'm not going to use it. What I'm going to do now is, once this landscape's finished generating, I'll show you a few shots of Wyvern Rage so you can see where we were at. This is a few years old now, but then I'll show you the new engine where it's at the moment. And here we have exactly the same scene, but it's now finished rendering. So let's have a little look around Wyvern Rage and see what it can show us. One of the strengths of this particular engine, as it is here, is it can run very dense flora. That's the grasses and the trees. Although there's going to be a new grass system in the game we're making. I don't know whether we'll be able to get it quite as dense as Wyvern Rage can handle, because Wyvern Rage can go much more dense than this. We're going to take a very different approach to grasses, and we're going to take a different approach to trees as well. We're going to be slightly more limited on trees because the trees are going to be slightly more interactive than what they are on this engine. What I'm going to show you here is as we walk closer to the things in the distance fade in gradually. So you'll notice there's a large area there that the grass hasn't yet been shown, and it's now fading in smoothly as we get closer to it. And that's the technique we will be using in the new engine as well. So as you can see, that the grass is getting stronger and stronger the closer we get. So it's a very smooth transition, and the eye doesn't notice the sudden appearance of grass in long-range distances. So that'll be quite a cool feature, especially when trying to spot things off in the distance. The engine does support buildings as well. Now, Wyvern Rage was obviously medieval, so this has a castle. But in the World War II game, obviously, we're going to be producing a lot of period buildings. My brother is, in actual fact, soon going to be starting work on some farm buildings to give us some rural stuff for some Normandy scenarios. As of yet, though, he's still finishing off some tank models, so that hasn't begun just yet. Now, one of the things we're going to be doing with our terrain engine is this is actually just going to be used to export a model that's then sent to a 3D art package for final decoration with buildings and what have you. That model is then brought into our actual game engine, which will add the grasses and the trees automatically, although we'll be able to specify woods and forests and so on in scenario settings. Now, one of the things we're always very keen on in Banshee is those little details that really polish off the game. In its own way, we're going to be replicating a little feature that Wyvern Rage had, which is persistent objects. So here we are firing some arrows into the castle, and now I'll go down and have a look at those arrows, and you'll see they're still there and will be for a very long time. I think Whiz and Rage kept them for about 5 minutes, but hopefully we'll be able to keep some stuff permanently in the game for the entire duration of the match, and some things will have to fade away. We'll be doing some damage scoring and stuff as well, which I might show you something else if I have time in this video a little bit later about that. I might wait for the next video to show you some of the other things. As we look around Whiz and Rage, one of the things I did want to show you, which was at the time quite an unusual feature for landscapes of this type, is Whiz and Rage actually supports sheer surfaces, or close to sheer surfaces, which most landscape technologies of this sort don't do. As you can see here, there's a cliff up ahead, which is very nearly sheer. It might not sound like much, but for what is basically a matrix-driven landscape, it's a matrix methodology of using squares, it's very unusual to have a sheer surface, and that's something I managed to include into Whiz and Rage, and I will be keeping in the new version as well. Now this is the project codename MP4. It's based on the Whiz and Rage engine, and it's the actual project I'm going to be using to build the terrain meshes to export into the modelling tool. Now what's different about this particular version of the engine is it takes a landscape like Whiz and Rage would generate, and then it will generate more and more and more of them and tile them together and stitch them all together so that I can have much larger landscapes. You notice that the grasses in this aren't quite as good, but don't worry about that. There's going to be a new grass system and new trees as well. So what we're looking at here is really the landscape and the grasses. Now, if you and the texturing. Now, if you notice here, there's a seam line there. That's because it's still generating the texture that we're currently on, which is why this bit of landscape doesn't look quite as good. In fact, you can see a bit over there in the distance, and it hasn't generated at all yet. The basic premise here is that I'm going to be using this to generate the meshes, and I have absolutely infinite control over the meshes in terms of how big they are and how many hills there are, how many cliffs there are, and it's a very, very powerful engine, and hopefully will give us some good landscapes. Now, the reason I'm not actually going to be using this code to actually run the game is I'm going to be programming the game in a completely different development tool, because our game will run not just on Windows but also for Apple Macintosh, or at least that's the plan. The Mac release will follow the PC release sometimes afterwards, because we don't actually have any Macs here anymore. I got rid of mine, but we'll be getting a Macintosh in and supporting it later on in development. So it will come out on PC first, but it'll follow on Macintosh afterwards, and that's something I'm keen to do. I've released a game for the Mac before. It was very successful, and so I'm hoping to follow that up, basically. So that's all I've got time to show you really today. I will post another development diary soon, because I've got some other stuff to show you from a Paradise Island project, which I think you might find interesting and will perhaps show some of the more interesting technologies we're hoping to bring to this game.